we'll go ahead and jump in. And thanks for joining me, everyone, for today for this webinar. I'm hoping to, my plan is to try to do these more often. I've been kind of sporadic with it, but I am going to be more consistent with it. So thanks for joining me. So anyway, so we'll jump in, and like I said, I'm going to mute everyone except for me. I think most everybody is muted, but if you, for any reason, we get unmuted, just be aware that any background noise folks can hear and that sort of thing. So anyway, so let's just jump in. So what we're going to be doing today, first of all, I want to talk about being in the business side of private practice. And I think there's, for most of us, when we went to graduate school, we really didn't get a whole lot of training in business. I know that everything that I've learned about being in business has really come out of just what I've taught myself and what I've learned from others. So so today what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the mindset of being in private practice, talk about some business planning and just some basics around that. Also, just how do you manage the business side of private practice, and what are some things you need to be thinking about with that. Also talk a little bit about marketing and just an overview of what marketing is and what it could encompass, and then talk about how you can think about growing your private practice, particularly around reinvesting in your private practice, and then just thinking about sustainability with your private practice. So if you were to think about business, if you think about the business of private practice, one of the things that goes into that is, sorry about that. Excuse me just a minute. I'm just really concerned that I might have lost everyone. Okay, good. It just got, the window got put in the background, and so I just was freaking out there just for a minute. So anyway, I'll keep going. So when you think about business, there's a lot of different definitions for business. But when I think about business, I really think about, particularly in private practice, and what we do as clinicians is essentially what we're doing is trading our time and knowledge for money. And we are service oriented. Our product is us. And so what we're doing is selling our product, which is us, our time and expertise, to people. And the truth of the matter is that people need and want that from us. And personally, I think that we deserve to get paid for what we do. So let's think about some of the mindsets around private practice. First of all, the first thing to recognize, and I don't know how many of you are just starting or if you've been in it a while, you can drop me a chat, questions in the chat as we go, and I'll try to get to those towards the end. But being self-employed is much different than being employed in many different ways. Most of us think of kind of the traditional way of thinking about what we do is that, at least in my own journey, what I did is I went to work for someone else. I went to work for an agency. They paid me a salary. They had expected hours that they wanted me to be there. They had a certain number of cases they expected me to see in order for me to be paid by them. In exchange for, they offered me benefits, and they offered me a salary and those sort of things. And so once a month or twice a month or whatever, they would write me a paycheck. And then the stuff that they deducted from my paycheck was on my paycheck stub. And then I would take that money and I would put it into my own bank account, and then I would use that money to pay for my living expenses and life and vacations and all that sort of thing. So one of the things to think about is really the difference between being employed versus self-employed. Being employed, one of the big differences is that what you pay to the government, particularly like our taxes, Social Security, and all of that is deducted from our paycheck. And so we really don't have to worry about that part of it till the end of the year when we go to file our income taxes. Also, usually with most being employed, usually there's some sort of benefits where they might pay your health insurance or give you money towards retirement, all of those sorts of things, and just depending on where you're working and what they provide. For the most part, you're going to have a fixed salary. In other words, you're going to have just a certain amount that you're going to get each year that is worked out in the contract that you have with them, whoever you're working for. And at the end of the year, that might be reviewed, and you can negotiate maybe a pay raise, that sort of thing. In terms of income taxes or taxes, for the most part, usually just the standard deductions apply. In other words, the government allows for us to have a certain amount of deductions. Now we can add to that through our charitable contributions and other different things that we might pay for out of our pocket that they allow for us to deduct. But for the most part, being employed means you just really only have access to those standard deductions. Obviously, you're paid by a paycheck, and that the company pays you, gives you a paycheck, gives you a pay stub with all of that. And all the money that you get from them is really your personal money, is the way I like to think about it. Being self-employed, the difference is that, first of all, self-employment taxes have to be paid quarterly. And this is one thing that I've seen with a lot of people that are just starting out, that they're not aware of this piece of it. So every quarter, every 3 months, I have to write a check that covers my Social Security, my Medicare, and all of that is required by the government. And the other thing about self-employment is that you're taxed at a higher rate because, believe it or not, and most people aren't aware of this, is that when you're employed, your employer pays a certain portion of this for you. For example, they pay for half your Social Security cost and half your Medicare cost. So when you're self-employed, you pay for all of it. So that's one big difference around the taxes and being paid that most people are not aware of. If you're going to have any sort of retirement benefits or insurance, all of that has got to be paid for by you. And that you're going to, for example, my health insurance, we were able to still benefit from the Affordable Care Act. And so we were able to get insurance much less expensively that way. But one of the things that you have to think about is how is that going to be paid, and what are you getting versus being employed. And then same thing with retirement. If you're going to have any sort of retirement, with being self-employed, you've got to set money aside for that and put money into that. Your salary, what you get paid, is based on your draw. Now, that's an accounting term, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that, but essentially what that means is that any money that you put into your business and any money that is made by your business, that is what you draw against to pay yourself. So you've got the net worth of your business, what they call the equity of your business is what you pay yourself out of. And in terms of tax deductions, all of your business expenses can be used as deductions. So on paper, at least, what I report to the IRS is much less than what I actually pay myself, because the money comes out of that draw, and I only have to pay taxes on what profit my company, my business makes. Again, don't want to go into it too much detail here, but the way that you manage your money in a business is much different, and how you pay taxes is much different than being employed, because you are self-employed. Now, it might be too, one of the things that I'll mention here is when you set up your business, it's always a good idea to create a separation between yourself, the money that your business brings in, and what you pay yourself. Nearly every accountant I've ever talked to, when I first started my private practice, the first thing they said I needed to do was open a separate checking account for my business. And so I did that. And so any money that anybody paid me for my services went into that business account first. And then if I needed to pay myself, I would pay it out of the business account. And so it's very important to keep the business and personal money separate when you're self-employed. Another good idea, and again, I don't have time to go into all of that in this webinar, is to set up a legal entity like an LLC or a doing business as, and it varies from state to state as to how you do that. So my business is Kingsport Counseling Associates, PLLC. So it's a separate entity, and what that does is protect me as well. So if God forbid somebody were to decide to sue me or something like that, that would protect me and create this separate entity. Okay, so talked about how self-employment is different than employment. Next thing I wanted to kind of jump into is just thinking about having a plan, a business plan. Now, a lot of times people feel intimidated by this, but a business plan can be complicated or it can be simple. And I think, simple is usually better. But the whole point in having a plan is, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So a couple of things I think you need to think about in building a business plan. I think the first place to start is to think about, what are your financial goals? In other words, if you're working somewhere else, what would it take to make a lateral move? In other words, what you're getting paid now, the benefits you receive, the total package there is what would make that lateral move. But I think even more importantly than that is, where would you like to be? In other words, what do you see yourself being down the road? Do you aspire to have to double your salary or double your income from what you have now? Do you aspire to, some people think of one day I want to be a millionaire and those kinds of things. But where do you see yourself financially long term? The other thing too that I think a lot of people, particularly when we first go to work and first start thinking about things, retirement is something that is way off the radar screen when we're first starting out. And I know for me, and I'm going to tell my age here, I'm 50, I'll be 58 in August. And so retirement is on my radar screen. So a lot of my financial goals are tied to being able to support myself when I do retire. Excuse me. So the other thing to kind of ask about in thinking about your financial goals, all of us kind of maintain a certain lifestyle of being able to have the things like a house, cars, how we spend our vacations. All of those sorts of things are things I think that we need to take in consideration with thinking about our financial planning. And so being able to write these things down and thinking about what's the amount of money we need to be able to maintain what we have. And then also what do we need to grow that? One of the ways to begin, and when this is where you get to the business plan side of it, I think a simple way to think about a business plan is to think about how many sessions per month or week do you need to reach your financial goals. $30,000 in a year. That was your salary that you had as a goal for 1 year. So I'm going to look at my calculator here. So we've got $30,000. Then I would add to that what I think my business expenses are going to be. So I've got to pay for rent for an office. I've got to pay for office expenses like phone and computers and even advertising and all of those things. So let's say I'm going to be I don't know if this is conservative, but I'm just making up a figure. Say in addition to my $30,000, I needed $10,000. Let me just do this. I think this will help. So let's do it this way. This is where I messed up. So if I need $40,000 divided by 48, that's 833. That's giving myself a month off divided by $100. That means I need to do 8.3 sessions per week. So that's what I mean by working backwards. Sorry, I used up so much time on that. So, and as you build that, as you think about your plan for, the other thing to think about with your financial goals is, in building for your retirement, as I said earlier, what do you want your net worth to be? And what I mean by your net worth is how much money, essentially how much money and assets do you have, in terms of the value of your house, what you've got invested in stocks, all of those sorts of things. The other thing I think is important to think about are your time goals. How many days of the week do you want to work? How much time off do you want and need each week? For the most part, I don't see any clients on Fridays. And so I take Friday as a day to where I can take it off if I want. I can give myself a long weekend, that sort of thing. And the other thing that kind of ties into your financial goals is making sure your time off is paid for. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about diversifying your income. And then how much time do you need to spend seeing clients to reach both your financial and time goals? So if you saw 8 clients in a week, would you want to see them all in one day? Would you want to spread it out over the week? An 8 client a week load is pretty low. So if you were to do the math, giving our example of $100 per session, if you were to see 10 clients in the week, that's going to boost your income significantly. And that was just using that $100 per session. And I don't know that that's necessarily average, but that was just an easy figure. So let's move on to managing your private practice. The thing to think about when you're managing your private practice is day in and day out, you really want things to run smoothly. You really want to be able to automate things as much as possible so that when the phone rings, you've got a way to do the intake. You've got a way of bringing on new clients. The other thing is thinking about maintaining the current clients that you have in terms of them being able to pay you, being able to file insurance claims, do your documentation and all of that. And so I really kind of think about breaking this down between the clinical side and the business side of things. And there's lots of different ways that you can do these two different things. On the clinical side, you need to have a way to do intakes to bring in, accept new clients and what you need to do around that. Once you start seeing clients, how you're going to document it, and then how you're going to keep those records, those clinical records and personal information. And that's where you again, don't have time to go into all of that today, but you have to be thinking about, particularly if you're taking insurance, keeping everything HIPAA secure and HIPAA compliant. And so all of that ties in as well. You also have to have the systems in place for being able to follow up with clients and then ancillary people. And what I mean by ancillary people, I know I have clients that might have been referred by an attorney. for a particular issue and they need court letters, or people asking for medical records for different reasons. Maybe they're trying to apply for disability, those kinds of things. So having a way to keep all of those records. On the business side of things, you've got to think about how are you going to receive payments from clients in terms of whether you're going to take credit cards. And I think I will say that in this day and age, you really need to take credit cards. That's how most people pay for things. And actually, it makes the accounting much easier when people pay by credit card than by check or cash. If you're doing insurance, if you're going to be on insurance panels, you've got to be able to have a way to take insurance payments and file the claims. Then the whole accounting side of everything is tracking your income and your expenses and where the money is coming in and going out. Lots of different ways to do that. I think when you're starting out, just simply having a spreadsheet that you use where you track your income and your expenses and then what you pay out, that's a simple way to do it, of doing that. As you grow and you get more and more clients and things start to get busier, you're probably going to want to use some sort of accounting program like FreshBooks or QuickBooks, something like that, to track everything. And on the clinical side of documentation, again, probably if you've been following me for a while, you've heard me talk a lot about G Suite. I think in the initial stages, G Suite is a good option for people, particularly if they're not filing insurance claims. You could really run a whole practice using G Suite just to make it simple. You could do all your documentation and store it in the Google Drive and have it HIPAA compliant and HIPAA secure with all of that. But if you're going to be doing insurance and filing insurance claims, probably some sort of electronic health record system is going to make more sense. In my practice, I use both. I use G Suite for a lot of stuff in my documentation and writing session notes, but all of that gets copied and pasted into my electronic health records. And currently I'm using a program called Therapy Appointment for that. So a lot of these things have kind of overlap with the business side and the clinical side. And then the other part of the business side of things and keeping things running smoothly is being able to have that constant flow of referrals and constantly developing your referral sources. And so having that constant flow of things. And as you grow, you want things to run smoothly, because believe me, when you run into glitches, it eats up so much of your time, and you end up, any time that you're spending working on the administrative side of things, that's less time you get to spend seeing clients, which is what actually brings in the income. So that's again, so much that we could say about that. Just not going to have time to go into the details of that. So another part of the business side, understanding business, is knowing how to market your practice. And the thing about marketing your practice is you can't just build it. You've got to build it and then tell people about it, and then they will come. And what I'm referring to is, of course, that whole field of dreams idea. Build it and they will come. But one of the things about marketing that I think is important to remember, and I really have heard this from several people, but I think of Allison Pereira, another private practice consultant that's a friend of mine. Allison says, marketing, the way to think about marketing is just making sure that you're telling people how you can help them and making sure that they can find you. And so that's, very simply, that is what I think of when it comes to marketing. So again, I like to break things down into kind of two different areas of marketing. The first area is just connecting with potential clients. In other words, people that seek us out directly. And when I think about doing that, I think one of the most important things to remember is creating a niche. And the reason why creating a niche is so important is that if somebody is having a specific problem, for example, maybe they're having trouble with trouble in their marriage, or they're having difficulty with their children, or they're feeling sad or depressed or feeling anxious about things, people are going to seek you out based on your ability to help them with that specific problem. So I think creating a niche is the number one kind of marketing tactic to be able to do, is to identify yourself as an expert in a particular area. So that's where creating a niche comes in. In this day and age, needless to say, you've got to have a good website. And so I think making sure that your website is attractive and that it's easy to navigate. Again, that's something we could just spend a whole bunch of time on, is talking about website design and what works and what doesn't work. In creating a website, essentially two ways to do it. One is to do it yourself, which is what I've done over the years, and I've just enjoyed doing that and using WordPress to do my platform. If that's intimidating to you, it doesn't need to be, but one way around that is to just find someone else to do it for you. And you could do that, again, in any number of ways. You could either find somebody locally that's a website designer or whatever, but usually what I recommend is just check out Brighter Visions. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy/Brighter Visions, that'll get you over to them. And their whole emphasis, I mean, all they do is make websites for therapists and counselors. And so that's their expertise in knowing how to do the copy, do the SEO, which means search engine optimization, so that when somebody searches you on Google, your ranking will be high. In other words, you'll come up on the first page of Google when somebody looks for you. The other part of connecting with potential clients in this day and age is using social media. Now, there's a lot of things. There's some ethical considerations, obviously, around that, and that it's a good idea not to allow clients to be your friends or not to friend clients. Again, there's a whole thing in ethics we could talk about around that. But I think what's important is just really thinking about social media as a way of posting and putting things out there that shows that you've got, number one, kind of the heart for what we do. In other words, showing concern for people. Also just posting things that are helpful to people and thinking about what they do, the struggles they're having in their daily lives. And so you can do that in any number of ways. And I would say the other thing I would say real quickly about social media is just to pick one or two that you really enjoy being on and that you're going to be on anyway, and really hone your skills on doing that. There's certainly understanding, like on Facebook, the difference between a personal page and a business page. And certainly you'd want to practice to be more of a business page, and then thinking about things that you're going to be putting on there. Blogging, again, this is kind of connected to your website, is being able to write things that kind of establish you as an expert. And also the thing about blogging and doing it consistently, that helps with your SEO, helps with your people being able to find you, because they're going to be searching for a specific topic. And if you're writing on that topic, that helps establish you as an expert. And so that just feeds into getting the word out and making sure that people can find you. Obviously, there's traditional advertising, excuse me, and there's some advantages and disadvantages to that. The one thing I would say about advertising is I would always try to do something that you can track. In other words, like if you were to do a Facebook ad or Google AdWords, if you're doing online stuff, I would want to know if that's working for me or not. And a lot of times with advertising, you don't have any way of really knowing unless you ask the clients that come to you directly. And I do that. I always ask in the first session, how did you find out about me? How did you come to use me? And so I would say 90% of the time, the reason people come to Kingsport Counseling, my practice, is that, oh, well, we just did a Google search, and that's how we found you. The other way is just being known in the community. It's just being able to be active in your community and having people know you and get to know you. And when they think of something that, when they're faced with a troubling time in their life where they want counseling or whatever, they'll say, oh, I'm going to call Jane because I know Jane. And that same thing works on the other side of this with connecting with potential referrers. Certainly making those professional connections with doctors, with attorneys, with clergy people. All of those connections are very important in getting potential referrers. Making contact and getting known with other healthcare providers. If you're going to market to a doctor's office, really probably the person you need to talk to are the nurses or the front office people, because usually what happens is a doctor will say, I'd like to get them into counseling. Can you give them some names? And so that's usually how that works. And so having those connections in that way. Again, networking in the community, being involved in the community, the same as it was with connecting with potential clients. The more people know you, the more your name is recognized, the more likely they're going to refer to you. Insurance and EAP panels. Again, depending on how your business is set up, some people prefer to go into this just simply private pay and don't accept insurance. That is, depending on your community and your demographics, people have very successful practices that are just strictly private pay. What I've found in my community, based on my demographics where I'm located, I really needed to be on insurance panels. So being on those insurance panels, you get a lot of referrals from those because people will go to look at their insurance benefits and see who's listed. And so we get a lot of referrals that way. Another way that you can get potential referrals are just previous clients. I would say in this past month, I've had at least 3 new clients that came, because they said, oh, my friend so-and-so said that they had seen you and they said you were really good, and they're coming to me that way. So again, doing that good clinical work is part of marketing. And I think that's something we don't think about. And again, that just ties in to the reputation in the community. One thing that I put down in the brackets below is, in addition to writing out a business plan or writing out some things, is to be able to have a marketing plan and being able to just, again, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So thinking about what are the things that you want to focus on each month in terms of marketing your practice. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, so that's good, and that way we'll have time for questions. Reinvesting for growth. Now, what I mean by that is you've got to constantly cultivate your practice. Just like with plants, you've got to put fertilizer, water, all of that sort of thing in order to make your practice grow. And so when I think about our investment, you've heard the old quote, it takes money to make money. I would say it also takes time to make money. And so one of the 2 areas that I think about in terms of your investing in your practice, in the early stages, that's really a bootstrapping phase. That's when you want to try to do as much of it as you can yourself. while you've got a lot of time. So in those early stages, when you don't have a whole lot of clients yet, you're going to be the secretary, you're going to be the front desk person, you're going to be taking the intakes, you're going to be taking the payments, you're going to be doing all of that. You're going to be doing all the marketing. You're going to be the one that's setting up your website. You're going to be learning about different practice management tools like G Suite or other EHRs like Therapy Appointment or Simple Practice or whichever one you want to do that. You're going to be learning all those things in the beginning stages. You're also going to be learning, putting your time into learning about business, like attending this webinar. You're doing that now. Learning about maybe talking to your Chamber of Commerce and finding about maybe some workshops and seminars you can go to about how to run a small business. You're going to be learning about marketing. Also spending time polishing those clinical skills. You know, in those early stages while you've got the time available is to be able to maybe think about getting a certification in something so you can establish that niche. And so thinking about how you invest your time is very important. On the money side of things, I think it's always good to be able to think about your ROI, your return on investment. So if I'm going to be putting money into something, I want to know that that money that I'm putting into it is going to bring me a return. So, for example, with advertising, if I spend $100 on a Facebook ad, or I spend $30 a month on a Psychology Today profile, and I meant to mention that in the marketing piece. It just occurred to me, I didn't mention that, is getting into directories online, like Psychology Today and your Google Business and that sort of thing. So anyway, back to return on investment. I know that if I invest $30 a month in Psychology Today, if it brings me just one client, it has paid for itself. So that's a good return on my investment. So thinking about things in that way. In other words, if you're going to put money into it, is it going to be an investment and bring money back to you in the form of new clients or other ways of producing income? As you grow, one of the things that you want to be able to do is to begin to outsource those things that don't actually bring you money directly. So, for example, as I grew, I finally reached a point where I realized that for me to do my claims manually online was eating up so much of my time. And so I invested in a practice management system that filed the claims automatically. And so I no longer had to spend that time with spending money each month on that practice management system. But because I could do more sessions, again, it paid for itself. It was a good return on my investment. The other thing, too, is thinking about is, maybe hiring a virtual assistant. If you can pay somebody $10, $20 an hour to return phone calls for you and make appointments for people, and it takes them an hour each day to do that, that is a good return on your investment. Because if they can schedule 2 or 3 clients and you can have that time to see those clients, that's a good return on your investment. Spending $20 in order to get 3 sessions at $100 a session. It's pretty good investment. As you grow, you want to invest in things that are going to double your efforts. And what I think about there is I finally reached a point in my own practice where I realized, okay, I'm full. I don't want to create any more appointment slots just because I value my time off and my time with my family. So what I did is I looked into what it would take to bring on another therapist as part of my practice. And so I did that. And so the therapists that I have in my practice, I get some I get a portion of what they bring in, and um, it's passive income in that sense. And so my efforts in bringing them in, and then that really kind of doubles the efforts that I put into building the business all along. And then the other thing too is just investing in things that will diversify your income. So for example, investing your time into maybe branching out into doing groups. You're going to have more people giving you money doing a group, and so you're going to get more per hour or more per time spent by investing in things like that. So, and it might take some advertising and that sort of thing. Another thing that you can do is just thinking about with your website and growing your website. If you wanted to do some advertising on your website, I would say be careful about that. But there are just affiliate programs. Like for example, here's a simple one for your website with your current clients is setting up. Probably all of us have books that we want to recommend to our clients. So becoming an Amazon affiliate where you can set up links on your website for books that you typically recommend. And so people go and purchase the book through your website, and then Amazon pays you a commission for referring them to Amazon for that. It's called affiliate marketing. And so that's just one simple way of diversifying income streams and bringing in income in other different ways. Writing a book and then selling the book. That's, again, another way of doing that. So finally, what I want to talk about is just keeping it sustainable. And one of the things I think about in keeping things sustainable is just really being in it for the long haul. In other words, just thinking about, if you go into private practice, think long term. And the other thing that I would say about that is absolutely be persistent and consistent with what you do. In other words, don't just try something for a short time, but keep doing the same things over and over again. Like, for example, with social media, posting stuff on a regular basis, making use of stuff like Buffer, which is an application that I use, where I can fill up the buffer and it puts stuff out on my social media just in a constantly at a certain time every day. Being able to continue your networking and making those community contacts, spending that downtime building your practice management systems, whether it be with G Suite or with learning how to use your electronic health records, those kinds of things, learning from others. And the other thing too is I would say investing in people that are going to help you grow your business. One of the things that I'll mention here is that one of the big game changers for me in just taking my practice to the next level was being part of a mastermind group where I got to be with and talk with and share ideas with other people in private practice that were kind of at my same level, along with having a mentor and helping you do some business coaching and some practice coaching along the way of knowing where to focus my efforts. And so put in a plug here is that I am trying to get together a mastermind group, and I'm planning on just going to look at this, doing this in the fall, because we're right here on the summer and it's really hard with people's schedules. But again, shoot me an email if you might be interested in that. But I think just again, my big motto is be persistent and consistent with things in your practice. So I think that's got it for today. Here's a few things I'm going to suggest for you is if you don't know about my podcast, listen and subscribe to that. I also have something that I've got out there called the Jumpstart newsletter. Now it's a paid newsletter, but and it's not very expensive. It's just $27 one time, $27 flat fee, and you get an email every week with some detailed things about practice building and building your practice. And for those of you on the webinar, I'm going to offer a discount and let you have it for $10. And so that I think that would be a pretty good return on your investment if you were to learn how to get to, just one client. It would absolutely pay for itself. So I've got that out there, and it's just an inexpensive way to learn more, and it's a newsletter that's or an email with details and information each week that's put into your inbox. Be patient with me. I've got to get that link that I put there, Practice of Therapy Jumpstart Discount. I've got to get that link active, so I'll have that done here a little bit later this afternoon. Also take at my other resources pages and connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter at therapistlearn.com. At therapistlearn is my Twitter handle, and also on LinkedIn. So, okay.